Hello and welcome to another edition of the GOfermentor Winery Chat. As usual, I start out by talking about some book that you should read. The last couple episodes we had a couple of cartoon books and fun, but this is a very serious session this time. So I want you to read a serious book. I want you to read this book, Concepts in Wine Technology by Yair Margalit. It's a few years old, but it gives you a very nice understanding of the whole process. Here's just a little bit of the table of contents. There's a bit about grapes, harvesting, destemming, what is free run, what is pumice. It goes on to the whole aspect of things, fermentation, bottling, sulfur additions, phenolic compounds. Essentially everything you need to know. Racking, fining, filtering. Now some of this is really quite advanced, but at least it gives you a lot of knowledge in one place. So you need something, this is the go-to book you should have in your library. And I'm sure you can find it on Amazon or any other online bookstore. So with that, let's start our topic for today. We have sold quite a number of these machines, and many of them go to people who are very competent at winemaking. They've been doing it for many years in different systems, and for them it's really simple to use a GOfermentor as opposed to a macro bin or a tank. But then we have a number of people who are very new to winemaking, and they're intrigued by the GOfermentor because it's so easy to set up and run. It makes the whole winemaking process really simple and inexpensive. The problem we have with some of these people is that they are not really winemakers. They're not very comfortable with the basic process, the basic concepts of winemaking. So I thought I would give you a winemaker in 15 minutes show. We will teach you how to make a decent wine. Listen to me for 15 minutes. Now we're going to do this one on red wine only, part one. And then in the next episode, or maybe after that, we'll do a session on white wine. So with that, let's begin. How to make red wine. Well, you've all seen the foot stomping, the Lucy, and so on, but that's not really what winemaking is about. That's one aspect of it. What I'm going to talk about for the next 10 or 15 minutes is the basic winemaking process. I'm going to teach you how to calculate the ingredients that you need in an easy way. We're actually going to give you an Excel spreadsheet. And you simply put in your numbers and it will compute all the additions for you. The objective here is to make something drinkable in your first attempt. So what you'll learn about winemaking today is what are the steps, what are the ingredients that I need, how long does each step take, and of course, since we base everything around the GOfermentor and Smart Barrel, we'll be using the GOfermentor Smart Barrel to run the entire process. What we'll not learn today is the nuances and art of winemaking. It takes a lifetime to be an expert winemaker. You have to do countless experiments, tastings, trials. This is something that is a lifelong endeavor. So I'm not going to go into that. I can't give you 30 years of experience in 15 minutes. We're also not going to talk about how to enhance flavors by additives, by processes, procedures, different yeasts, how to enhance the nose of the wine. These are all very advanced things. Nor am I going to cover specialty wines, rosés, champagnes. I'm not also going to tell you how to make something superb, because this is an art. To make something superb requires a lot of experience. And they'll do this in time. Remember, the GOfermentor Smart Barrel is just a tool. It's like getting a power drill. It doesn't replace the craftsmanship to make a good cabinet. So I cannot replace talent, artistry, experience, or innovation, but I can give you a tool that at least makes it easy to make wine. Let's just quickly review red winemaking, traditional way. You start out with the destemming, crushing operation. The grapes go into some kind of fermentation vessel, macro bin, tank. And what we're doing here is trying to keep the temperature constant. We're trying to keep air out of the system. And we're using some kind of punching mechanism to make sure the cap is dispersed and kept wet for the duration of the fermentation. The fermentation runs its course. The fermentation runs until the sugar is finished. At that point, we only have alcohol, we have wine. This wine is then taken to a press. We press out the wine, collect it in tanks, bags, barrel, whatever you want, and there's going to be clarified, aged, stored for many months. In the press, we also have the waste pumice. These are the seeds and skins that are left over from the fermenter, and they're basically, the wine has been pressed out of this, and this is basically a waste material. And you can use it for fertilizer, disposal, landfill, whatever is appropriate. Then we'll go to winemaking GOfermentor style. And there are many, many episodes on our website which go into great detail on these different steps. I'm just going to give you the overall flow so that we're all on the same page here. The destemming crush operation is traditional. There's really nothing different that we do here, except that we pump directly into the liner. That's the easiest way to get the crushed grapes into the liner. There are other ways. You can cut a hole, you can dump them by a bucket, you can use a mush pump, but that's the simplest way to go right from the destemmer into the bag, completely clean. Then, as you know, we have our automatic punch system. You set up the number of punches you want per day, and the machine will automatically squash the must and make sure the cap is dispersed and wet. So this fermentation goes on until, as I said before, the sugar's finished. Now you're done. We don't have to transfer the fermented material to a press because the GOfermentor is a press. We insert our perforated press tube, we connect a pump, and we simply pump first a free run into a collection bag. You can see on that lower corner there, we have the fermenter with the pipe coming off the press tube into, in this case, an air-driven pump, and the clean wine is going into the collection bag, smart barrel in this case. Towards the end, when the free run is done, we activate the inflation system, the press mode, and that secondary blue bag squeezes the pump, pretty much making it dry. Our yields are very comparable to traditional press, somewhere 150 to 170 gallons per ton of grapes. Quite comparable. Then we go into the racking. And in our system, the racking is always done in smart barrel. So it goes from a smart barrel liner to another smart barrel liner and so on down the line until your wine is ready to be bottled. Let's review this in a flow chart, right? You destem the grapes, takes about an hour. You fill and prep the GOfermentor. Now, since there's no cleaning, this is really about a 20-30 minute operation to fill it and make sure everything is ready to run. Then you add the nutrients. Then you add the yeast, maybe half an hour for that. Now, one thing I do want to point out to you, since most of our wines are made without any sulfite additions, which we recommend because it really enhances the flavor and color, once you fill the GOfermentor with crushed grapes, especially if they are at over 70 degrees Fahrenheit, you need to get the yeast in quickly because otherwise the wild yeast that came in with the grapes may start to take over. And there's nothing wrong with wild yeast fermentation, but it's not something for the beginner. You can get in a situation where it gives you a strange flavor, or it doesn't finish the fermentation. You get to maybe 7% alcohol and this wild yeast cannot make it anymore. So for your first time, try to use a good commercial yeast and try to put it in within 24 hours of filling this bag. A lot of people do advanced things, cold soak and other operations, but these are advanced topics. Again, if you go read the wine literature, most people come back completely befuddled and confused because there's so many different additions and methods and procedures. So what we're going to do today here is basic. It's really how to make a wine in the easiest way possible. You will make a drinkable wine. It may not be the greatest one, but it'll be drinkable. When you get good at it, you can do a 4-day cold soak or whatever you want. Now, if your grapes are cold, let's say you buy them refrigerated from a supplier, they might be at 40 degrees. Now, you cannot put the yeast in at 40 degrees, the yeast will not grow. You have to warm it up to at least 65 before you put the yeast in. Now, if you're picking for your own vineyard, you will be above 65, so you don't want to delay. This is really very important to get the yeast in as soon as you are up to temperature. It means more than 65 degrees Fahrenheit. Okay, now the fermentation will proceed. Now here, the timing is no different than a macro bin. It doesn't ferment any faster in a GOfermentor. And this will last 8 to maybe 14 days. It depends on the temperature, it depends on the yeast, it depends on the sugar content of the grape. How do you know you're done? It's very simple. The fermentation is complete and ready to press when all the sugar is gone. We are making a dry wine. So we need to make sure there's no sugar left in the fermentation. How do you know this? Well, the first thing you should do, you should taste your wine every day. And you will see after so many days, it won't taste sweet anymore. It won't taste sweet anymore. So that's you're getting very close to pressing. So when you cannot taste any sugar, give it 1 or 2 more days. Turn the punch off, let the thing start to settle. Okay? If you have good instruments, you can measure it, you can measure sugar levels, great. But you don't have to. Taste it. Okay? Now you're going to press out the wine, and I showed you simply a matter of inserting the press tube, running a pump, get the free run, squeeze the pumice with the inflation bag, get the rest of the wine out. This typically takes an hour or 2. Again, there's no press to clean, nothing set up. Put in the press tube, put the pump, off you go. At the end of it, your pumice is contained in that liner. So you can take the liner out with the pumice in it and dispose of it. So there's no bucket brigade, no shoveling must all over the place, no dirt at all. Now we go into racking and aging. Now this is going to take about 3 to 6 months. And you're going to transfer this clean wine maybe 3 to 4 times because you want the sediment to be left behind in each transfer. And then you're either going to bottle it or you're going to put it in a barrel and store it for several years for aging. When you go to read the books and you go to a course in winemaking, it's very confusing. There's so many different options. So what I've tried to do is I have provided an Excel spreadsheet. It's called redwine.xls. It's on our website, and there'll be a link at the end slide. So this will give you an Excel spreadsheet that will make your life easier in making a basic wine. It provides the ingredients that are absolutely necessary. After this, you can add in tannins, you can add in coloring agents, whatever you want, but you need this to make a decent wine. So let's just go over this spreadsheet a little bit. So in the first page, you can put your winery name there. Our Sky Acres is up there. You can change that. By the way, the spreadsheet is modifiable. It's free. You can copy it, give it to anybody you want. Just keep our copyright on the bottom. So assign a name. In this case, it was Cabernet Sauvignon. Assign some kind of batch number. We use a system where we use the year and the number of the batch per year, anything you like. The system will put in the file name and page number so you can find this again. Then you can put in where you got the grapes from, what's the varietal, and then the basic data you must take from the grapes. You need to obviously know how much you have, how many pounds, kilos, tons of grapes you have, and what is their Brix level. So this spreadsheet, all the way through, when you see a blue box, it's something that you enter in. Wherever you see a pink box, it's something the spreadsheet is calculating. So I put in the amount and the Brix. The system calculated for me the amount of must I'm probably going to get. In other words, what am I going to get after crush? In this case, it thinks you're going to get 865 liters or 228 gallons. It then estimates for you how much wine are you likely to make. How many gallons of wine and how many cases is it likely to be. Just an estimate. The next thing down is the data you should enter after your destemming crush operation. And the most important thing up here is the weight of the starting must. Now, it's sometimes difficult to calculate this, or to measure this, because you don't have a weighing scale. So it's no big deal. Use the estimate from the last step. You'll be fairly close. Then sample the must, the Brix, and whatever you have in terms of measurements, pH, acid, ammonia, tartaric acid, whatever you have. It's not critical that you have all these analyses. The real thing that's critical here is the weight, because we're going to use this weight to calculate all the ingredients that we need. The next part of the spreadsheet calculates for you all the additions you need. So first of all, up there, you see that number D254, that is a type of yeast. So this is a place for you to record what yeast you want to use. Now we could spend a whole session on what yeast goes with what wine, but go to any of these yeast supplier websites, Lalamon, many of these, and they pretty much have recommendations for white wines, for Cabernet Sauvignon, what yeast is useful. Now, one of the nice things about the GOfermentor is that you can run many fermentations easily. So you can actually split your yeast, split your grapes, and run 2 different yeasts and get 2 different wines. So keep that in mind. The yeast is something, again, part of the artistic repertoire. Now, the system in the pink boxes will calculate the amounts you need. You can add in what bricks you want. In this case, you see somebody entered in 24. Now, our starting bricks is already above 24, so it showed you that you don't need to add sugar. It's a negative. You already have enough sugar, but if you need to sweeten it, it will tell you how much sugar you need. The same thing with any acidification if you need to add some. I recommend you avoid acidifying the wine in your early trials. It's a very tricky operation, and let it go and deal with it once you get some more experience. So there you see it's calculated you've got to add 258 grams of yeast, and it tells you should dissolve that in 5,160 milliliters of water. It then tells you what nutrients you need. Now typically some kind of starter. We use Dynastart, you can use GOferm. There's many different nitrogen additives that you can put in. You need to do those. So look at the package directions for that. Typically the ratio is 1 gram to 1 gram. So 1 gram of nutrient to 1 gram of yeast. And then we usually add diammonium phosphate to make sure we don't have a nitrogen limitation. And again, the system calculates for you a typical amount that you should add to this amount of grapes. Then you should go and sample, make these additions, then sample your bricks again, your TA again, your pH again, because that's your starting point for your fermentation. Then you see in step 2, it gives you all the steps on how to prepare your yeast. Weigh out the yeast, weigh out the starter. Take some water and heat it to about 40 degrees C. 38 to 40 degrees C. Buy a thermometer, use a thermometer. It's quite important that you don't go above 42, and it's quite important you don't go below 35. Add the yeast, stir it once, let it sit for 30 minutes. Now typically we add a teaspoonful of sugar at this point just to give the yeast a little head start in getting going. So when you come back after 30 minutes, you'll see the yeast all foaming up and it's all now rehydrated, ready to go. Take the starter material, the Dynastart and the diammonium phosphate, mix that in some water and add that to the GOfermentor. You can do that anytime. Run the punch cycle a couple of times. It'll help disperse these nutrients into the must. Now go back to your yeast. It should now be nice and puffy, a lot of foam, about 30-40 minutes have gone by. Slurry it up by stirring it a couple of times and add it to the GOfermentor from the top, obviously. Now this material you don't want to mix in. You don't want to run the punch now. You actually want the yeast to be on the surface. Because remember, in the beginning, the yeast needs to grow to make more yeast. And for that, it needs oxygen. And the way we supply oxygen is through the headspace. The oxygen is full of air from the fill. So the yeast will consume that air, grow to a larger amount, then it will switch over to anaerobic metabolism and only generate CO2 and alcohol. So you don't want to mix the yeast in order to not inhibit the initial growth that you need. And then, of course, write down the date and time so that you can record everything on the spreadsheet. The last part of the first page of the spreadsheet is basically the rest of the summary of this batch. So we're going to monitor the actual fermentation on a log sheet, which I will show you next. But then when you finish the run, you should put in the harvest date, how much wine you got, the alcohol level, the glucose level. And then step 5 is kind of what we call disposition. What happened? It was thrown away, it was blended, it was bottled, it was put in aging tanks. Let you keep track of the entire history of the batch. It's kind of a birth record and a death record, all one tab. So the next tab on the spreadsheet is called log, and that puts up this little table for you. Now the program automatically puts in the inoculation date and the time from that first page, and it puts in that as a starting column. So what you want to do is every day measure the temperature, pH, acid, glucose, alcohol, if you have the analytical instrument, and record it in here. So you'll have a record of day by day how your batch is progressing. And then if you go to the graph tab, which is the next one, it'll actually plot this out for you. This particular one is empty because we don't have any data entered into the system, but then you can have a nice plot of how your fermentation is progressing. The last tab is really the cellar sheet, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But now, the fermentation was done. Remember, sugar's finished. We pressed it. So now we're going into our racking. Now, what is a function of racking? It's the transfer of wine to enable settling. We need to get rid of the yeast, the dead yeast that came through, other compounds that are going to settle out. So we're going to transfer a number of times, and we're going to discard the sediment. So whenever you do a rack, you're watching the wine. When it starts to go cloudy, you stop transferring it, discard the sediment. Were you doing this for storage, for aging? Malolactic fermentation will happen in the first couple of months of racking. Additives, oak chips, oak staves, other additives you want to throw in there for aging. And then of course it's a way of holding wine for blending, transportation, and finally even to convey it all the way down to your bottling line. Now for red wine, we have a process that we like to use. In red wine, you typically want some micro-oxygenation in the early phases. The wine coming out of the fermenter has an affinity for oxygen, and it's something that needs to be satisfied to make the wine develop completely and to stabilize the tannins. So we sell two kinds of smart barrel liners. We sell one we call high permeability, HP liners, and these are used for the first few months because they allow oxygen to diffuse through the plastic and provide a controlled micro-oxygenation. And you can control it by looking for how long you stay in that bag. 1 month, 2 months, depending on how much oxidation you want. Then you transfer it to a low permeability bag, an LP bag in our terminology. This bag has very little oxygen permeability. It's about 1/10 of a barrel. So you can keep wine here for months or maybe in a year. And from now on, you'll be transferring only from low permeability to low permeability. And you could end up in your 300-gallon smart barrel and go right to the bottling line or blending, or you could put it into our full barrel, which you've seen before. So your wine, it looks like it's got nice wooden barrels, but of course they're no trouble and nothing ever goes bad. And then you can age it longer there and bottle it from that system. So the cellar log is used to record all this. So this is an example from a wine run last year. So it tells you kind of when oak was added in a certain date. This actually oak was added to the fermenter. It was impressed, how much it got. Then the racking was done off the gross lees, how much wine was there. Then in March there was a trial run to de-acidify this wine. It was split. So use this last page to keep track of exactly what you did with it. And you'll find years later, it's very useful to have this record of how this wine was actually made. What have we learned here? Well, I hope you've learned anyway something, that winemaking is a process. You have to follow the steps. It's like cooking, right? You need to do certain things in a certain sequence. You need to use the ingredient calculations. The smart barrel GOfermentor, the spreadsheet makes it really simple to do that. Don't overthink it. Don't try to read some article about some kind of a tannin stabilizer and that goes in. Or, I have read somewhere that wild yeast makes really great wine. Don't overthink it. Start simple. With the GOfermentor and the simple method I've shown you today, you will make an acceptable wine the first time out. It'll give you confidence, and then from there you build your skills. The other point I want to make is winemaking is an art. This is really a tool. I've given you a really basic process, elementary, 101. This is just a beginning to lifelong learning, but I want you to have success on the first trial. It makes you look good, it makes us look good. So you want a quick success, impress the wife, impress your friends, and then you're on your way to read and learn and try additions and complex procedures. And again, we just provide tools and advice. So thanks for watching. Like I said, the book by Yair Margalit is really recommended. It's very useful. The book by Jamie Good, I introduced it to you a couple of episodes before, is very, very handy. And then morewine.com has a number of guides. These are available, you can purchase them or you can download the PDFs. And the one on red wine, the guide to make red wine, is really very useful. It spends a lot of time on cleaning, which you obviously don't need to worry about, and it spends a lot of time on sulfite additions. And again, if you're going to use the GObarrel Smart Fermenter thing, you don't need to worry about sulfites to any significant degree, so you can ignore that part of it. Now, I should say one thing. In the interest of full disclosure, we now have a relationship with More Wine. They carry our entire product line, so you can buy from us online, or you can buy it from the More Wine website. They sell all the equipment and liners, and there is no price difference from either site. Of course, the product support is done by GOfermentor. So, you know, I'm sure you buy a lot of things from More Wine. They're a very good supplier, and it might be just easier to do everything in one basket. I leave it up to you. But I just want to say, I want to mention that we are now connected with morewine.com. They distribute our equipment in the United States. So that's my news for this episode. And we will again see you hopefully in a couple of weeks. If you have any suggestions for episodes you want me to talk about, please email them or text it. I think next week we'll try to do a simple guide to white wine making in the GOfermentor. So again, thank you very much for watching, and all the best. Cheers from Far Hills, New Jersey.